Welcome back to Canada's Real Deal. I'm your host, Anuj.
And I'm Anika.
And we are at part 2 of how Canada can handle the housing shortage.
So just a quick recap of what we talked about in our last video. There's a housing shortage in Canada. It's kind of a crisis. And this is tied into immigration.
Mm-hmm.
Our immigration policy is not really complementing our real estate plans. So we discussed kind of some of the things that are holding us back from developing enough units to house all these people that are going to be coming into the country. And we talked about labor shortages.
Yep.
We talked about how there's zoning limitations to actually get these houses built.
Yep.
And then how there's a backlog for getting the building permits approved, which is just slowing down the entire process and de-incentivizing people to actually develop new units.
Yep. The cost of building, the high interest rates, the timeline it takes to completion and holding those costs for that long. All of those other little factors that contribute in a big way.
Mm-hmm.
And this is how we end up with a housing crisis.
Right. And building permits, the reason that they have such a backlog is because they need to account for fire safety, plumbing, construction materials that are going to be used. All these things have to be approved in a design. So obviously it's an important part of the process. It is a necessary, necessary to look through.
Yep.
It's for our protection. But let's talk about the solutions that the government's proposing.
Yeah, the government, and then I'll talk about mine.
Okay, perfect. So first, let me talk about, let's revisit history a bit. So in the 1940s, we had a similar housing shortage.
The 1940s, like when you were born?
Just so everybody knows, I'm only a year older than her, but she loves to make these like fossil old age jokes.
She's a grandma, guys. Okay, don't believe her.
Okay, anyway, so back in my day, we did face a housing shortage back in the 1940s. And the way that Canada dealt with that is they created a wartime housing plan.
Okay.
So what they did was set up a crown corporation called what was it called?
WarTime Housing Limited.
That's right. Yes. So they set up the crown corporation. And what this crown corporation did was design blueprints or basically created structural designs for houses.
Okay.
So they had these cookie cutter designs and then they just sold it to developers.
Okay.
So the developers already had pre-approved designs. So all they had to do was take those designs and then build them.
And so they're essentially just reusing floor plans and the design that somebody else, and then just putting it all over land.
And the crazy thing is you actually still see these houses like all over Toronto.
Okay.
Yeah. I even see them like pretty often in Hamilton. But if you're in the downtown area, you'll see these houses and they're from the 1940s and they're still they look great today.
That's true. Yep.
And so what the government is proposing is we repeat that strategy and then we kind of build these houses in factories.
Okay.
Right. And the craziest thing about it is, actually, tell me, how long do you think it took to build one unit back then?
1 unit?
Yes. How long do you think it took them to build a single home back then?
It's got to be at least a couple months.
No, they were able to put up some of these houses in 36 hours.
36 hours?
Right. So
less than 2 days.
Exactly. So when we're talking about the issue of how Canada needs to get 686,000 units made per year to meet the demand and to fix the housing affordability or the housing shortage. And right now we're only making 240,000, 280,000 units a year.
Yep.
This would be a great strategy.
It would be a great strategy, but the thing I'm thinking about is there must have been much more land in 1940 to kind of build these, I'm assuming, single family homes.
Yes.
Right? Because those are the types of homes that when I saw in the 1940s, 50s, they're all like that. I don't think there's land though.
So couldn't we do that with multiplexes though? Like start, I guess we would go into like the yellow belt area. If we were allowed to, they have started allowing for some multiplexes in the yellow belt because they are trying to do something to figure out how to get more units.
If you look at the land map, there's only 12% of land in the city is allowed to build multiplexes right now.
Right. So they need to relax those regulations.
I think so.
Yeah. For sure, we need to have a strategy that's more density focused. We need to have a more intelligent way that we're using the limited land that we have. But couldn't they create like these cookie cutter designs for multiplexes?
I think so. And you know what? Now that I'm thinking of it, there's a lot of not land, but buildings that are underused, right? Why not take a plaza and start building on top of a plaza or something instead? So it has that commercial space at the bottom, and then we can have these units above. Motels, right? They're kind of becoming obsolete. Parking garages where it's just the parking garage and it's taking up, over an acre of land.
Yeah, and that's a strategy right now, right? All these condos, they go into places where like it's a parking lot or something, and they repurpose it and turn it into a condo, right? I think we're at a very interesting moment in history, right? Like just like what they did during the Second World War with this wartime housing plan. We're in a post-COVID world. Yeah, the world has changed completely since over the last 5 years, right? We're not going into offices anymore. We're not. A lot of our shopping is done online, right? The malls might become an obsolete concept soon. Right. So it does make sense to start looking into those areas and building on top of them in a purposeful way. And I'm thinking if they develop these strategies well enough, people will probably go for public transit instead of parking. So maybe we don't even need those parking garages anymore. Maybe everyone can just walk where they need to. If you have these commercial units just downstairs, why would I need a car? Yeah. Public transit really depends on the density of an area if they're going to service it. Right. So if we start having more dense neighborhoods, naturally we're going to have to start pushing public transit that way, which I love because it's a sustainable solution. I know you love that as well, right? And that's our public transit it's difficult to get around the city. It's not as bad as maybe other places in the world. I get that. But there is it's not perfect. It could be better. But again, that goes into the investment, the demand. A lot of people are not even using public transit anymore because of safety or the price, whatever it is, comfortability, convenience, right? If it's going to take me 2 hours to go across the city, I might as well be in my own car, right? Right. Absolutely. And so then it's traffic, all of these things that there needs to be more HOV lanes. There needs to be underground transit. There's some sort of incentive for people to opt for public transit instead of a car, right? This takes up a lot of space, garages. Yeah, that's right. And a lot of people actually are starting to convert their garages into a rental unit. Yeah. Right? Which is an option. Too. Yeah. So that's free space that you could use, and that could be another unit. So that's what I'm saying. There's a lot of things that people have backyards. Why not put them on the roof or something, right? And start using the backyard and make a laneway home or a garden suite, right? Yeah. But again, one thing we have to consider is people don't like it when they're, and we said this in our last video, people don't like it when the landscape of a neighborhood changes. Think about what happened in the Highland Creek area when they introduced the new LRT. Right? There was so much pushback because they were like, it's going to be one-way traffic and I won't be able to kind of get onto the, just simple things like that. It does make a huge impact on people's quality of life in that area, right? But if public transit is a lot more easier to use, it's just a lot more frequent and your air quality will be better. Yeah, and you don't have to switch from a bus to an LRT to a train and then switch another train. If there's actually just more lines that are getting you to where you need to go, it would be the more feasible option. Yeah, so basically their planning needs to be there, that they need to incorporate all these other different factors before they start planning for these new builds. Absolutely. But going back to the cookie cutter design, that fixes the problem of having the building permits backlog, like not having to be in that queue. But it doesn't really solve the problem of zoning regulations. No, it doesn't. For condos especially, I don't see that working. Right. And I don't think we want a city where the condos are looking the same. No, you can't. Yeah, that's true. You can't really are we going to just have buildings that are just going up to the sky, or even mid-rise buildings where everything it's the same apartment unit over and over and over again? I don't think many people be up for that. No, they wouldn't. I think there should be more shared green space, and there should be maybe a multiplex can be right beside a single family. I think we need to get over this. One neighborhood should all just be bungalows. One neighbor should all just be condos there. If you look at our map, it's
very segregated. There'll be areas where there's just skyscrapers. And then right beside it, there'll be just these large backyard bungalows, right? It's really odd because I don't see that anywhere else I travel. It's very odd to see that kind of setup. And whenever people come to Toronto, they always say that you just have pockets where it's just flat. Yeah. And then it just jumps into skyscrapers, right? Like Yonge and Finch. And then right beside you, you just have these huge mansions, right?
Yeah. Like we live in the Greater Toronto area, but the idea of what it's a suburb life, right? But people don't really think of suburbs when they think of Toronto around the world, right? They're seeing like these huge buildings, but we kind of have to think about how we can change that landscape in the suburbs as well now if we're going to meet that demand.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think, like we said, the solution is more density focused solutions, multiplexes, garden suites, laneway houses, and building these things faster. So what's your opinion about having these factory built homes popping up everywhere? How do you think that's going to do in terms of like marketability?
Well, I'm actually a huge fan of modular homes, right? It tends to be 15 to 20% less costly just because you're building all in a factory. It saves you time because you don't have to worry about weather conditions, right? If there's rain, they can't work on it or whatever it is, right? So you build most of it in a factory and you have the surplus of materials, right? So you can order in bulk. That's why the cost of it is much lower. And then just take it to the site and then do your, kind of final touches or whatever you wanted in terms of interior design. You just do it on the site.
Yeah, that's so true. I think a lot of times, like if you go in those new development areas, like so much of like the roads and everything is just like it's just being used to store materials.
Yeah.
Right. And then it's not the most efficient use of space. It's not the most efficient use of time.
Yeah.
If the area was cleared up and then they could just like bring in the houses and stuff, it would just be a lot more quick.
Yeah. And I see the future going that way, actually.
Yeah. We need to be as efficient as possible.
Yeah. I think people need to get over the stigma.
Yeah. I mean, at a certain point, I think we're changing what we want in homes. Like a home is a place to live. It's not necessarily like, I don't think many people are really concerned of having the biggest home now.
Yeah.
I don't think many people are concerned with having a place to store so much stuff anymore.
Yeah. The family sizes have gone down decade to decade, right? We don't need that much space. Most people don't want to manage that big of a home. It's a lot of work.
But to be honest, think about whether we actually need that space anymore in the modern world. Like a lot of us are using computers for everything, right? We don't need like these large stereo systems or this large theater system anymore. Like things are becoming more and more compact.
Those hobbies. I have a client, and I was shocked to hear this, but they didn't want this house because the lot was too big. And I was like, wait, are people actually thinking like that? But it's a lot to manage. And they're like, what are we going to do with it?
Yeah.
Right? We have a family, we entertain inside, or we have the basement, whatever it is, but I don't really want to manage this big of a lot.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking, what a waste of space in that backyard. What are you going to do?
Put up a garden suite.
Yeah, put up a garden suite. But again, there needs to be funding for this, right? Nobody has that money available to just go put up an entirely new building. That's tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, but
actually even hundreds in some cases if it's big enough.
But you and I have been discussing this a lot, those container homes.
Yeah.
Right? Which is like a great way to just kind of have a garden suite just set up like within a couple of days, right?
Yeah.
But the problem is, like you said, financing. There are no lenders that are openly advertising or being like, of course we'll invest in a container homes. They're not just doing it. Like really the only option people have now is to take equity out of their homes to purchase these container homes.
Exactly.
Which means that if you want a container home, or you want to have that ability to have rental income, you need to already be a homeowner, and you need to be a homeowner for long enough that you have enough equity to pull out.
Yes. And it's kind of counterintuitive because once you refinance or take that equity out, now you have higher monthly payments, right? And now you're trying to offset it with this garden suite, right? So you end up being basically the same place you began with, right?
Right.
So I think it's not just that. There has to be other things that they take into consideration. I know CMHC said that they were going to give a low interest loan for a secondary unit, like maybe basement or a garden suite. So I'm excited to see how they propose that and see who takes advantage of it. I'm definitely going to look into it for myself. But I think there's other things. There's extra costs just in property taxes, and no, the rain tax is not going to solve this. But just buying in Toronto is so expensive that people are getting away from the city. We pay double land transfer tax here, which is, I think, is ridiculous. And if people are moving so quickly after a year, and the next buyer is paying this double land transfer tax again, I think it's redundant. The city gets all this money and it's always put on the resident, right?
Mm-hmm. No, the city's definitely addicted to making money off of real estate.
Yeah, and it always seems to be taxes.
It's always taxes. It's always levying fees against the investor, right? This is like their big cash grab.
Yeah,
right. And it's been part of the strategy for so long. I think it's going to be difficult for them to move away from it, but they definitely need to figure out a way to incentivize investors or homeowners to take out equity to build these garden suites or to put in these container homes or to build these laneway homes, right? There's got to be more of an incentive because right now you're not really making much off of it. So why would you do it? Why would you take on that problem for yourself when it's not going to give you that much of a benefit? Like the cost benefit analysis just doesn't really make sense. Yeah. All of this stuff is just kind of setting up a really, really bad situation. It's a recipe for disaster, really.
We're kind of doomed to fail now.
Yeah.
But I think I could talk about landlord-tenant issues for hours, and we'll probably do another podcast on that. And then I'll share all of the stories from myself personally and my clients.
And she has a lot. Trust me, I've seen a lot of stories.
Yeah, probably things you've never heard. But
then, those professional tenants are going to be just sitting there making notes like, oh, that's a good strategy. Just kidding.
I hope you guys listen to it, you professional tenants.
Yeah.
But thank you all for watching. If you haven't watched the first video, please go see that.
And please make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. When you comment, we want to see what you're looking for. Like, what do you want us to discuss? What are you interested in? And please share this if you find it useful.